Okay, so a little bit of design on them, two-sided design on the spinning. And the reason we're using this very hard maple is that we're going to be using a spiraling tool, a miniature spiraling tool, to put the pattern in. And this spiraling tool works best in very hard wood. It doesn't fray, and it gives a nice deep design, which you'll see will be used in making the pattern. And we're going to use two tools in this. We could use just one tool, a spindle gouge, a 3/8 spindle gouge. You could do the whole thing with this one tool and the spiraling tool. But I also use a 1/2 inch bowl gouge, and I use the bowl gouge mainly to get rid of wood, because I make about I make about 20 or 30 of these at a time when I do it. I use one 7.5 inch piece of this maple to get maybe 4 tops out of this one piece of maple. So I'm moving pretty quickly. Sometimes I'll do all 4 tops without ever turning the lathe off. But for this demonstration, I will be turning the lathe off at various points so you can see what progress is being made. Okay, so safety-wise, we always want to make sure that we have safety glasses on. And what I do is, one of the first things I always do in turning is make sure that my tool rest is nice and clean and smooth on the top. And what I usually do is take a piece of sandpaper, 240 or so, rub it across like this. You know, people say use wax and all the rest of it. You really don't need that. As long as you've got a nice smooth top with no indentations, your tool will move very smoothly. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so we start with the very hard maple, and it's about 2 1/4, between 2 1/4 and 2.5 inches in diameter. I usually start with about a 7.5 inch piece, and I can get 4 tops out of that one piece. I've already made 1 top out of that, so you can see each top that I do, the next top will be started. So this next top has already been started. I have got 1 out of here, and I just make doubly sure that the chuck is tightened down as well as I can get it tightened down. And I'm on these chucks, make sure that you tighten both sides, not just one side. Even though one side will hold, 2 sides holds a lot better.
So that piece was about 1.5 inches longer?
This piece was about 1.5 inches longer than it is right now, and I got one top out of that, like right here. Okay, so first order of business is to form the bottom, and I bring my tool rest up. Gouge. I want the tool rest height to be at about half of the diameter of the spindle gouge, so that when I go through to the point, I'm going right through the point. Okay, speed-wise, first of all, this was mounted in another chuck, so I'm just going to chew this up a little bit with my bowl gouge. I want it to be running true, because visually it helps when it's running true. Okay, so now I'm going to form the tip. Okay, I'm going to go straight with my spindle gouge. Turn the spindle gouge sort of on its side so that it's rubbing the bevel. Right to the point. Okay, now, the one thing to remember about these points, right here, this point is very, very, very sharp. I don't want the tip to be very sharp, because the first time it hits the ground, it'll chip off and it will not spin the right way. So I go back just a little bit again, and I make it just a bit less sharp on here, and that'll spin very nicely. One of
Would
the
you do
other
that differently if you had different wood?
One of the other things, well, if you have different wood, I'm not sure. I always use the maple. I've tried softer woods. Softer woods don't hold the kind of point that I'm looking at. One thing you can always do is just take a piece of sandpaper flat and rub it down one side of the bottom, and you'll get a nice little tip on there to do. Next
What
point.
sort of brick is that?
That was 240. I just used one piece of 240, and I might use this when I do the edge, and you can see that in a minute. Now the next thing is to form this edge. You want to form this edge at the top. So I just take my spindle gouge and I ride it over, and turn it up like so. So it's just a motion over and up, and then I'll take the spindle gouge and start working away some of the wood on the back.
Pause a sec.
Like so. Okay, so I'm going to do a little more shaping on this because it's a little too thick. And I'll bring my spindle gouge like so and just kind of rub it across as if I'm doing an upside down shear cut. And now I want to get rid of this. I want to get rid of a lot of this bulk. I could do it with the spindle gouge. I could go step by step by step like that, but it's much easier to just take a bowl gouge and get rid of the wood fast. The bowl gouge gets rid of it very fast. And you can see here I'm starting the next top over here.
You ever use a spindle roughing gouge for that?
I do use a spindle roughing gouge, but this I just find much smoother and easier for me, because I'm going to turn this around now and I'm going to use this bowl gouge as if it's a spindle gouge. So I'm going to get rid of some more of this. And again, always use your body to make your cuts. Coming back, and I just pick up right by the edge here. And that last cut, I'm riding the bevel of that bowl gouge all the way down. And I don't want to go too far because I can catch this and it'll go over and spin and it can actually knock this off. So this is the basic shape of the top of the top and the bottom of the top. Okay. All right, now what I want to do is I'm going to smooth this a little bit with 240 sandpaper. And the reason I do that is that when you go over this with the spindle gouge, sometimes you can leave a little bit of roughness, a little bit of almost chatter with it, and you want this edge to be really smooth because that's going to be a prominent coloring point. So I just take a little bit of sandpaper, and now I'm getting ready to do the texturing with this Sorby spindle gouge, the mini spindle gouge, mini spiraling tool. I turn my tool rest around, and I make sure that the tool rest is far enough away so that the wheel is not going to hit it when I work on the wood. I take this at about a 70-degree angle, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make 3 patterns with this gouge by pushing, with this spiraler, by pushing it into the wood. Okay, the first one, like so. Then I move over. I want a little bit of a flat, so I go with a second one, and I'm just pushing it in and keeping it pushed in, and then the third one out near the edge, like so. And what we end up with is three nice patterns. So, okay, now I don't do anything with those patterns. They're completely finished as far as I'm concerned. And again, you can see the reason why we use the very hard maple, because you don't get any fuzz or any tear out on it. It's just the best wood I've found to make these tops.
No brushing?
No brushing at all, no nothing. Okay, then I turn the tool rest to the angle so I can get into the back of this, and I'm going to do the same type of 3 patterns on the top of the top. And this is a little bit trickier because you don't have as much room to move, and you're not going to get quite the same pattern. You're going to get a little bit different pattern, and the tool has a tendency to catch and move very quickly, so you have to get a good grip on it. Push 1, 2, and 3. and I've got three patterns on the top. Okay, now the next step with this is coloring, and for coloring I use high-end coloring markers called Prismacolors. I found these to be the brightest. They keep the most color. And the first thing we're going to do is put a pattern on here with the light color. And we're going to slow the lathe down. I should have said that I slowed the lathe down to about 1400 to do the texturing. I'm going to slow the lathe down to about 1000 to do the coloring, and that's so that it doesn't burn up the markers. Too fast, it'll burn up the markers, and because you've got this pattern, it'll also eat up the markers if you go too fast. Okay, so I'm going to color the light color first, and I can see where my pattern is, so it's very easy to get that coloring where the pattern is, and that's where I made that pattern. And then I'm going to do the outer edge, and again you can see how smoothly this is going on. It's going on smoothly and cleanly because I did the sanding. And I'm going to do the same thing on the back side. I'm going to color the three patterns. Okay, those patterns are done, and then I'm going to take my darker color. I use the lighter color first, and with the darker color I'm going to do the smooth part. Now this is a very smooth area, again because I rode that bevel down the way I wanted to. Didn't have to do any sanding. You never want to have to do any sanding with these, especially if you're making a lot of them. And I do the same thing on the back. And I'm just coloring in the flat area. And for all intents and purposes, that part of the top is done. Okay, now we're going to work on the stem. And to the stem, I go back to the spindle gouge, speed it up a bit, up to about 1800 is good. And all I'm doing here is getting rid of some wood. This handle is going to be about three quarters of an inch long, and what I want to be sure of when I do my last pass here, that I ride that bevel all the way down and start my turn right there. That's going to be the top of the top. So you can see that again, by riding that bevel down, I get a nice smooth finish on here, and that's going to take the coloring very nicely. Again, I turn this down to about 1000 again, and we're going to do the coloring. And this time I use the colors alternately. So I've got my orange, and I want a little bit of the red. Now, one of the things that I do is I use the white of the maple. That's why I use the light color maple to form another pattern. So I can use maybe 3 of those and give myself a pattern, and then go back to my sort of orange here, and then a little bit of the reddish, a little bit of the orange, another little bit of the red, and I'll just start this orange up here. And when I start this, I'm gonna make this top. I'm gonna round this top out a bit. And as I round it out a little bit, I'll just take it, do a little bit more coloring, and then I'm gonna turn my spindle gouge the other way. Take this down a little bit, and I'm just going to push it across like so. And what I'll have is a little bit of I'll have a little bit of a nib on the end. Just take the sandpaper like so. Now you can just sand that and leave that like that, or you can take your coloring and mark it like this. And kind of just rub it with my fingers so that it kind of blends in. And then it's almost finished. Now the reason I say it's almost finished is because I do one other step. And we take the... And what I've done now is I've put a buffing wheel on here, and this is a wax buffing wheel. I'm going to run it at about 1750. I'm going to take a little bit of carnauba wax, rub that on there, and then I'm going to push my top on it, do the outside edge, do the top. And what this does is it protects the coloring a little bit, so that tiny little fingers, wet little fingers, don't cause any running. And it also puts a nice little shine on it. And that's your spinning top.